everybody. Welcome to another episode of BookGoodies Author Interviews podcast. My name is Deborah Carney. I'm your host. And today I have with me a very interesting guest, Raymond Foster. Raymond, why don't you tell the people who you are and a little bit about you?
Well, I spent almost 25 years with the Los Angeles Police Department and retired at the rank of lieutenant. After my retirement, my first book was published, and then in the next 8 years, I taught at university and continued to write. I now have 9 books out, and then primarily now what I do is speaking and consulting. I do international police consulting, so I spend quite a bit of time on the road, sometimes overseas, sometimes here in the United States, and so that's kind of an outgrowth of the publishing and the writing. So essentially that's it.
Okay. Well, that sounds very interesting, and there's a lot more to it than that. But so what do you consult about? Is it like helping people get their police departments organized, or is it private security? What kinds of consulting?
Well, the last major project that we wrapped up assisted the Government of Jamaica in designing a 3-year nationwide anti-gang strategy. And so I spent almost a total of 6 months in Jamaica really working with all levels of government, from their Ministry of National Security to their Defense Force, the Constabulary. I traveled through all 19 parishes. I met with just about every community group you could shake a stick at, and a lot of NGOs and foreign governments. And so that was really a high-level project and very intensive. We concluded that in December, so that's about 6 months ago. Since then, a smaller project was that I put together an 8-hour training course and delivered it on leadership for the state of Minnesota, and they sent 200 of their top law enforcement executives, basically captains on up, from the entire state, as well as from South Dakota and I think Wisconsin too. And apparently that was successful because they ordered 250 more copies of my leadership book.
Nice.
That tells me they're going to do it again probably next year. So the consulting projects range from real intensive and real thorough to not so much. Okay,
awesome. So what was your first book about?
It was called Police Technology. The story of how I write the book tells you really what the book's about.
Okay.
About 10 years ago, I was sitting in my office at the police department, and I was running the fugitive section. I had 75 detectives working for me, and my boss, the captain, walked in, and he said, "Hey, you want to apply for a grant, this technology grant?" And I said, "Sure, when's it due?" And he says, 3 days. I'm like, well... Okay, so I pulled in a few of my supervisors. We sat down, we put pen to paper, and we produced this grant. But like any good grant writer, I put in conference money.
Right.
Well, we were awarded this $250,000 grant for this technology project, and so I started looking for conferences. And I saw this conference in Hawaii, and I knew there was no way that the police department, even if I had the money, was going to send me to Hawaii as an observer.
Right.
So I called the University of Hawaii, and I got a spot as a presenter.
Nice.
And I did a presentation on facial recognition technology in law enforcement. And in the middle of my presentation, there was like 75 to 100 people in the room. I get essentially in an argument with a scientist, and I win the argument. And afterwards, a man walks up to me and he says, "How would you like to write a book?" He was a field rep for Prentice Hall.
Nice.
And not having any idea of what writing a book involved, I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And about 18 months later, my first book came out, Police Technology. It's used in over 100 colleges and universities. We're working on a second edition as we speak. And it essentially is, I can tell you, it's 287,000 words, 175 pieces of artwork, 21 chapters, and well over 400 pages.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was a big project, and being ignorant and not knowing how much work that was, I, of course, jumped right in and completed the project.
Right. And that led to, obviously, you were traditionally published, and then what was the next book after that?
Well, the next book, and this is where I started to learn some lessons. Anybody who's an author who's received an accounting statement from a publisher begins to learn some hard lessons about how accounting is actually done. And also, because you're responsible for getting the artwork and doing the releases and the galley proofs, and there's so much work involved in it, you really are, except for distribution and marketing, these days the writer is the publisher.
Right.
Even with large houses, you've got to do so much of the editing yourself and so much of all that goes on with the production of a book. The only thing they have is marketing and distribution. So I started thinking about how I could begin to build my own marketing and distribution base and how that would work for me in the future. In the meantime, Prentice Hall offered me another contract on another book, but they wanted me to write with a co-author, and actually offered me 2 contracts. And again, this is a learning curve. These were co-authors they introduced to me, and those relationships did not work out. I then got contacted by Learning Express, and they asked me to write a series of books for them, which I did, and those were on how to take a police exam and a sergeant's exam and things like that.
So they were little short books.
Well, there are a couple of, I think in the 80,000 word range, not really short.
Well, much shorter than that big volume that you did the first book on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked those on a contract basis, which means that there's no royalty attached, even though my name is on those books. And I was satisfied with that because then I was able to, in the contract, okay, I'm just going to write. All of this other stuff, you guys are going to do. And then I was sitting at university in the copy room with a new professor, and we were talking, and we end up writing a leadership book.
Okay.
And we go through the regular. Now, I go back to Prentice Hall, and they're not interested, so we do the regular query letter cycle thing. We actually sell the book. And we get an advance to a small publishing house, and the guy's really excited. We submit the book. About 6 months goes by, and there's no contact. And so when I contact them, there's discussions back and forth, and they're just now starting their production phase. And pretty soon, this guy starts sending me emails about rewrites. Now, this is my 8th book.
Right.
So it's not my first rodeo.
Right.
So the rewrites get more in depth, and finally he sends me one that essentially says he wants to do the whole project over. And I send him back an email, and I go, hey, look, you're not McGraw-Hill. I'm not Charles Dickens. Publish the book. We end up giving the advance back.
Right. I saw that coming.
Yep. And so then we go, and we have a much larger press that they love this idea. And they want to give us a much larger advance. In fact, the advance was $10,000, which for any author is going to tell you that's a good advance. That's a decent advance.
Right.
So as we start talking and get down to the contract, we really, both Andrew and I, my partner on writing that book, we really start digging at them on marketing and distribution, and they just don't have our marketing plan. They don't see the vision of the book going where we see it going. And it's clear they're going to pay us for it, and it's clear they're going to try to put it out, and they're going to try to do this, and there's not any real concrete. So we end up turning that down. And I told Andrew, I said, at this point, I've built up a pretty good marketing machine. I have 120,000 Twitter followers. I have my own podcast, been downloaded over 1 million times. I have about 80 websites that I own. We have some marketing over here. Let's self-publish this.
Yeah, you totally had the perfect platform to launch yourself and not need a publisher.
Well, yeah, that was our feeling, was that, and here's the metric that I use, and most people don't know this. It's my understanding that a bestseller, to be classified as a bestseller, your book only has to sell 2,000 copies.
Seriously?
Yes, if you sell 2,000 copies, you're a bestseller.
Wow.
If you're self-published and you sell 500 copies, you're wildly successful. The leadership book is sold about 8,000 copies so far.
Nice.
And here's the thing. I don't get 10% of it, all right? Andrew and I get 3/4 of it.
Right.
so when you do the math on that, traditional publishing house with a 10% and a 15% royalty tier, and also the book buybacks, holdbacks, electronic copies, overseas sales, discount selling, all the little things that really knock your royalties down, they would literally have to sell probably 200,000 copies for us to have the same kind of income we've already had with the sales that we've had.
That's awesome. That is really a great point for authors to understand. And again, you already had a platform, but it's not that difficult for an author to, as they're going through their process, if they're doing it right, to build up their platform the same way you did. And Twitter's relatively new, so you did a lot of work to get that many followers in your niche. That's actually very impressive.
I actually have 9 Twitter accounts because as you use the right word, and the word is niche. And so here's some advice for authors. Number 1 is your niche is not your name.
Correct.
Your niche is whatever you're writing about. And so when you design your website, your Twitter file, your Twitter handle, your Facebook page, however it is, it's got to be focused on your work, not you. I see that mistake by authors all the time. While you can go out right now and Google Raymond Foster, and I will come up on my webpage as the number 1 because I've branded my name. That's not what I intended to do. That's a sub part of it.
Right.
So the most important thing is niche. And the second thing for an author is to realize that a book is like a child. And if you've ever raised a child, you're writing, the day you get the idea for a book, that's conception. And we all know conception's a lot of fun. Okay?
Yeah.
And then while you're writing the book, okay, that's pregnancy. And when the manuscript is prepared, that's birth. But you still got the terrible twos, toddler, junior high school, and hopefully you get to college. Because it's a project that you've got to manage. The one book now, we've been managing it for almost 10 years.
Right.
And you really want to look to get a strong back shelf life and to understand. So, if you're having this big thing, you're starting to write your book now is the time to start your Twitter handle. Now is the time to your website. Now is the time to think about how do you get into the local Rotary clubs and the Kiwanis and all of those places as a speaker. Now is the time to start on your marketing. You're very fortunate now that we all live in the 21st century because distribution is not as much of a problem as you think it is. There are ways to get around distribution. So marketing is the key.
And you hit it right on the head. Like before, I do a lot of photography books. So before I start a book, I do a search. And I see what's out there similar to it. And then I do a search on my title that I want to use. And you immediately, like you said, you register the Twitter handle. You create the Facebook page. You get yourself out there in social media as that book identity or as that book series identity, so that you have some place to send people that doesn't have all your nonfiction, fiction, and photography all together. They get to go to what they're interested in. So like you have your police books, you have your leadership books that are more all-encompassing, and you have a wider market, and you can take care of those people without boring them with the part they don't want, or diluting them with the part that they don't want.
Exactly. And another phenomenon when you do it that way is if you get a person in, let's say for your photography that you did on dogs, then they're going to go, well, Deborah did dogs. I wonder if she's done anything else. Oh, she did cats. I want her cat book. And so once people, you have to have a way with however you design your social media campaign and your campaign around your books, you've got to think through, once you've got a customer, how do you close them on another book? How do I turn them into a speaking engagement? How do I turn them into a consulting client once they're familiar with me?
Yeah, that's awesome. And you've built a lot of your platform, it sounds like, through your speaking. Your first book opened the doors to, like you said, it started because of a speaking engagement. And then you were able to get the rest of the books because of your speaking, because people heard your voice and they wanted you to then write a book about it so you could spread the word more widely.
Yes. And I will tell you that as far as marketing goes, Twitter does work. I have had books adopted by universities. Well, our leadership book was adopted by 2 universities because the professor followed the Twitter handler, got a tweet, followed the link, and the link went to information about the book. They actually bought a copy of the book when normally we would send them a desk copy.
Right.
And the book gets adopted. And if you get your book adopted in that scenario, well, every semester 50 students are going to be purchasing the book.
Yep.
I mean, that adds up.
That adds up. That's a great resource. I think I need to change what my nonfiction book targets are.
Well,
make sure there's something the universities can use.
Well, we also then, because everything we get for the last, up until the first of this year, was based on really the internet and word of mouth, we decided that we would experiment around with some direct mail stuff.
Okay.
And so what I did was with the books that are there's 3 of them that are good for universities. One is police technology, the leadership book, and then I wrote a small book on the history of policing.
Okay.
And the idea was then to sit down and do an internet search and I searched for syllabi within the context of a leadership course or a police administration course, depending on the book I was researching. Then from the syllabi, I got the professor's name. With their name and knowing what university they work at, finding out their mailing address is not much work.
Right.
So it would take me about 10 minutes, and then they put them in a spreadsheet, print out the labels, and then write a dynamite marketing letter. I mean, just spend a ton of time, let a lot of people look at that, a one-page letter. The first batch we did had a 44% return rate, and that was on just a small
wow.
batch. Yeah, it was a small batch of 50. And that's a huge return rate. And, of course, each of those people, the 24, I think, 23 or 24 that we sent out a desk copy of the book. So you've got the cost of the book, the cost of the mailing, and the whole thing. It comes to about $12 direct cost.
Mm-hmm.
However, again, when you're looking to if out of those, if you can get just one to adopt it, and and it's a long-term project. In fact, I stopped mailing out in April, and just 2 days ago I got a return 3 months later if somebody wants a copy of the book.
Mm-hmm.
On the third batch, we ultimately did 1,000 of these.
Mm-hmm.
So, once you've dialed in with the internet, then there are ways, if you use your writing skills to craft that marketing pitch and get your book in the hands of people who will recommend it to other people.
That's what it's all about, because that's what books are all about. Even though we think we're marketing via the internet, you are also marketing to people who come to the internet, and then they still have their whole, they belong to a book club, and they can recommend your book to be the book club book of the month, or there's all these people that are still offline that go to local bookstores or rely on recommendations from friends as to what they want to read. Now, are your books available as ebooks as well as print books, or have you gone one way or the other?
Well, and that leads me to the last book that I did, which is just an ebook.
Okay.
And what happened was, recall during the conversation that I had a contract to write a book, and it was on police administration.
Right.
And it didn't pan out, but it didn't pan out because I did my job, and my job was to, one of the things I was to write was a chapter on the history of policing. And that went to the publisher, and the publisher sent it out to reviewers, and the comments from the reviewers were, the most concise, best history you've ever read, great thing, they were all very positive. Well, the book falls through, and now I've got this 22,000-word history of policing chapter that I own.
Mm-hmm.
It's the thing writers got to know. You own that. And so what am I going to do with it? So I start thinking, you know what? It costs virtually nothing to do a Kindle.
Exactly.
I made a Kindle book, and I put it up there for 99 cents.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We probably sold 400 copies of it. Now, I make 35 cents a copy, and so what I've made, $120, $125 maybe. But I would have made nothing, number one.
Right.
But more importantly, I've gotten phone calls. I got one from the Indiana Bureau of Peace Officer and Standards. Can we get a hard copy? I'd like to put it in our library.
Yeah.
And the answer is yeah. And I get a phone call, contact. Hey, I've got another book. So I thought of that small book not only as a good contribution to the field, but also as
a lead generator.
Card. Yeah,
yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I give up a little bit, and again, it was an experiment. Kindle cost me nothing, virtually nothing. Well, it actually cost me nothing. You can format it yourself, and we learned
yep.
to do that. Loaded it up, and we marketed it a little bit, but it's up there.
Yep. And because you've sold so many at 99 cents, that pushes you up in the sales ranks, and people get more visibility to your book that are people that wouldn't have seen your work prior to that. That's one of the things that we've been telling people that we know is that, if you've got that, $100 book or that $100 series of books that you want to put out, put it into $10 chunks or $5 chunks of smaller material so that you can get yourself out there and found. And it's reaching an audience that you don't reach through the search engines or through any other place. And plus, having an Amazon author page will get you as an author. You know that when people search for your name, they're going to find your Amazon author page in addition to your own websites. So
yes, and here's another. This is a hot tip for I think authors. If you have a web page, and you should, unless you live in New York, which is the only state that you can't do this in. There might be one or two others now, but this is going to change when the federal law ultimately changes. Become an Amazon affiliate. And then when you place that artwork, you put that line of code in that drops them down to purchase off of Amazon, making you the affiliate, and you
mm-hmm.
pick up another 6.5% to 9% on your book.
Mm-hmm. You can actually be an affiliate in New York State. That was the first state that they challenged the law, so they didn't drop their Amazon affiliates.
Oh, good. Well, then, I know in California there was a period of time
yep.
that actually happened, and that forced me to form a Nevada corporation, then they changed their mind, and now I'm stuck. I just did a renewal on my Nevada corporation. But the point is that if you can, we're talking 6.5%, 8% on the sale of the book.
Right.
But if your book's $20, I mean that's $1.30, $1.40.
Mm-hmm.
If you sell 300 or 400 books, I mean it's worth the investment for a simple line of code.
Well, and the other thing too is that it encourages people. You want to get your book out there for review, and it's another incentive for someone who reviews your book to actually push your book because they can use an Amazon affiliate link, unless they're in the handful of states that don't allow affiliates. And it's a cluster mostly right now it's like North Carolina and a few other states down in that area. Which was the one that was Indiana or something. Anyway, Illinois, that's the one. Illinois is the big state that they dropped affiliates into. So, but in the long run, people who review your book can make money from selling your book, which makes them even more excited about making sure your link gets out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're along that line of thought, as an example, this podcast interview, it's to my benefit that when you broadcast this, that you send me the link, and then I tweet it to 130,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
So you get, and I know that'll drop 600 people minimally onto your webpage.
Mm-hmm.
So as an author, when I tell people I have this marketing base, I'm attractive not only as a guest, but also to them and their bottom line.
Right.
So my point is, don't be afraid to share if you're an author. Especially if you can find somebody whose work is non-competitive but complementary to your own.
Yes.
You bring them on your own podcast that you have and talk about their book. They bring their audience, and of course, it's very reasonable to mention your own books.
Yep. No, as you can see, I'm a big fan of podcasting. I actually got around 100 responses to the query that I put out for authors to talk about their books. So for the next couple months, I'm going to be busy doing all these podcasts, and you guys are all going to benefit from it because we will get the people from, since you're one of the first ones, you'll get the people all the way down the line that come in to listen to the podcasts of the authors that we do in the next 2 months. And it's good for everybody,
Yeah, and that's one of the another tool that you use to get me here is a tool. I'm on that database constantly. Mm-hmm. And if it's even partly related to me, I will send something out. I will agree to do it, and I just got a speaking engagement off of that. In fact, Hataro, right? Haro.
Yep. Help a reporter out.
Yeah, and I haven't looked at the Tuesday stuff yet. But again, what's it taking, an hour, and you get to speak. So another tool for authors.
Well, and the thing that I like about podcasts, while researching, I looked at some book blogs, and I'm actually going to add book bloggers to the Book Goodies podcast as well, because they have an insight as to how they find their authors that they want to interview. But one of the things I saw is that there's a lot of written interviews. Like, here, go fill out this form with these 8 questions, and then they just put it up. I prefer to hear your voice. I like having a discussion. I don't want you to just drop in, stock answers to certain questions. As we're talking, you're thinking of tips to give the authors that are listening, and, you're sharing your experience, and it's a discussion. It's not a one-way, oh, here's what I wrote. Hopefully people will read it. It's a more personalized approach.
I agree.
So they get to hear you and your voice and your commitment. So you gave us a couple of good hints already. What's something else that you would tell an author that's just starting out? Whether it's fiction, nonfiction.
Well, I would tell you that writers write. And your job is to write every day, whether or not you are in the mood. That's what you do. I mean, if you worked at GM, they don't let you just build cars the day you feel like it. You've got to write every day. You may not write your best stuff, but you've got to keep doing it. And since you write every day, you've got to get as much of a multiplier effect on your work as possible. So, as an example, when you first start out, people will offer you, they'll give you exposure. Mm-hmm. So you end up I did articles for magazines at first for just exposure. Mm-hmm. And ultimately I end up selling them for a small amount. And what you have to be very careful about is when I sell them, I have pretty much a couple of stock contracts I downloaded and tailored to me. But as an example, somebody wanted me to do a series of articles on Homeland Security for a paper, a regular trade publication, a magazine. Mm-hmm. So I did these 6, and I sold first-run serial rights print media. And after they had run them, all the rights then revert to me because all I sold was first run.
Right.
So then I went back to an online media, and I sold first-run electronic rights.
Nice.
So now I got paid again. After they had run them, they were all centered on Homeland Security, so I grabbed a domain. I used those 6 as content. We created a very quick website, and we optimized it, and it pulls in a little bit of traffic. And so with having my books up there and the Amazon affiliate, now for time immemorial, as long as I pay the $9 a year for the domain name, those 6 articles will generate a little bit of income. My point is that, your work can be used more than once. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you package it and repackage it for different audiences. And you have to be really careful. If you're going to write for the internet, you don't only want to write things people will read. You want to write stuff that search engines will find. Mm-hmm. As an example, I did a series of articles, same scenario, on police vehicle technology. I then did this website on police vehicles, and I never got any hits to it. For a while, I just stood there and stared at it. I wonder why nobody ever goes there. I wonder why. Well, it's because people never search for police vehicle. They search for police car.
Nice.
So I went through and I did a find and replace and all the whole thing, re-optimized it, about half hour's work, and now it's police car. And a couple hundred people a month go there, and it's the same scenario. And that is, they're exposed to my writing. They see my books for purchase. it is another portal into people finding out about me.
Yep. I like that. You are building small niche sites, which we talked about earlier. You said focus on the niche, even though you have one global overriding thing that you would like to talk about. You've got all these little offshoots, and you cater to those little offshoot niches, and you don't ignore them. And you can always take a little piece, like you can take a chapter from one of your longer books and put it on a website as a teaser, and put it out as blog posts or whatever, and then say, for more, buy the book. And with today's instant, everybody wants everything instantly, having things available on the Kindle, you'll get a lot of impulse purchases through that.
Absolutely, and we did put that leadership book up on Kindle. It's about half the price, and here, most authors don't know this, but or they may know this. A Kindle version, you can drop the price about half of your trade paperback and still make the same royalty.
Yep.
So, I don't care if you get it electronically or not. What I care, what my partner and I care about on that is the income.
Yep.
And you can, as you said, once you get them in there, if they have a Kindle, then you can have them download that. And earlier you said that one book may lead to another, and I can clearly see that. I can see that when one or more of the different books will get up there, then I'll see people who will purchase it because I know they'll either send me a direct message on Twitter that says, hey, I got your leadership book, it was great, so I went and got the history book, I like that one too.
Yeah.
And vice versa. So there's once people get into reading an author, and we're all this way. I mean, you get into reading somebody's books, you want to read what else they have written, and that works for nonfiction authors too. Mm-hmm. Even though you're not writing fiction, you're still telling a story. I write textbooks, but it's still storytelling.
Yep.
And it's not. That's one of the things one of the comments I'm proudest of is people will say, this is a textbook, but it's so easy to read and interesting. Well, that's because I wrote it as a story.
Right. It's not dry.
Right. You can write. You can do storytelling, and that's what you're doing. We're storytellers.
Mm-hmm. And then you can also take the conversation that people have with you about your books and know what you need to write next. Because if you get a lot of comments along the same line, hey, I love the leadership book, but I'd like to know more about X, then oh, hey, maybe I should write about this. 20 or 30 people have expressed an interest, so that means there's probably a few hundred thinking the same thing, and they just didn't express it to me yet. So it can actually give you a guide as to what you should maybe work on next.
Well, we took that concept and probably pushed it a little further. Every book that I write has a companion website, and the leadership, which is at www.pokerleadership.com. Because the book's Leadership Texas Hold'em style, we use card playing as a metaphor to explore leadership.
I love it.
Yeah, well, the title itself gets real visceral reactions. People either automatically like it, or I got one guy that sent me an email that said that I wouldn't read a book on leadership using poker more than I'd read a book on using prostitution as a business model. And I'm like, well, that guy didn't read Freakonomics because they pretty much did that. So
nice.
but see, the thing about that I like is, as an author, if somebody has a real gut reaction negative to your work, mm-hmm. that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because you drew out this really hugely negative emotion from them, which means that there are probably just as many people getting real positive. But the point is that you drew an emotion out of them, and that's really just with the title.
Yep.
But on the leadership book, that book is what is it? It's about 95,000 words. And what we did was we were writing that, and having a little more experience at this time, we wrote it in conjunction with writing the textbook. So there are various places throughout the website that say, or throughout the textbook that say, for more information on this subject, go to the website, and then on the particular page, we call them chapter supplementals, there are links out to different articles or exercises or things. And the reason that we did that was, again, if somebody was searching the subject morale in organizations, mm-hmm. they're likely to find the website. Mm-hmm. And by giving a little bit away, and then holding a lot back, you're teasing, and you get a sale that way. And we do make quite a few sales. So if you're writing a book, you can. I always thought if you're writing a fiction book, let's say, and you had a character and it did a whole bunch of things, and you had a whole background that you had written for the character, but you didn't use it.
Right.
I would find a way to write a 200 or 300, maybe a 1,500, 1,800 word. I like the magazine length article, maybe 1,800 words on an experience the character had unrelated to the book story.
That's an excellent. That's excellent. That's an excellent point.
And then let the character tell another whole short story, and you might do this 2 or 3 times because you write a whole background for your character. I mean, it develops itself, and then once people get to know the character, you can always have a tagline. But John Smith did this, but what happens when he finds his dog axe murdered in the backyard?
Right.
To me, I mean, I'm like, well, I know John Smith, and I'm kind of now attached to him because I read about him. I wonder what he would do.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is you're writing your book. Remember, we live in the 21st century. You've got to incorporate it with the technologies that are around now, and the ones that you can reasonably assume will be there in the future. So when we wrote the leadership book, we were looking at, okay, the companion website has to be as meaty as the book itself, because it's going to draw a lot of people in.
That's excellent, because, and the other thing too is you have your links in your book that lead back to your own site, and at that point you can do a capture, an email, you've got your email list or whatever, so that you can capture those people, get them engaged on your Twitter or your email or your Facebook, so that you can then reach out to them. Even though, no matter where you publish your book, unless you're selling it yourself from your website, you don't get the customer information. So you have to be creative on how to get those customers back to your website or back to a property you own, so that you can engage them enough that they want to give you their email address to be updated on what you're going to do next in this series.
Yeah, and I would add to that, when you do a website, you do your contact information. One of the things that I do is I have a phone, that's the one that I called you on. Mm-hmm. I have a post office box, and I have an email. And so this phone rings all the time. Mm-hmm. And somebody called me a little bit ago and said, hey, I need to speak to somebody at the Air Force Office of Special Investigation. I got this phone number off your website. And so I'm like, okay, hang on a minute. And literally, I will just go down and I'll Bing it. I don't use Google anymore because I think Google are a bunch of bastards. and I'll Bing it, and I'll go, okay, well, here's the number, here's the main number. And I don't mind, it'd take me, 2 minutes to do that, but the phone rings constantly, and it's a dedicated line, and sometimes I get quack. Mm-hmm. I get people who, tell me very strange stories.
Which can be a book of its own.
Yes, but you've got to be, the more available you are. In my post office box, they laugh all the time because people show up there to meet me. So people are out there looking for you, and you should find as many ways as you can for them to get in contact with you.
So at your office that you have listed for your Nevada corporation, people are showing up randomly, walking around going, where is he?
Well, actually, that's the California address, but not. I don't know if that's happened in Nevada yet, but absolutely they have. And the guy will say, yeah, they walked over. They always point. They point to the boxes, and they go, he's inside there.
He's inside the box.
Yeah. And they'll say, yeah, somebody came by looking for you today. And I go, well, they drop a business card? And sometimes they have, sometimes they haven't. And, it's people who, when I did a book signing, somebody showed up with, 6 of my books.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah, that's nice, but it's also kind of scary.
You're being stalked.
Okay. You bought every time I write a book, you're buying it. Okay, I appreciate that, but move on, please.
Yeah, what are you doing research on?
Yeah, and so you have to be prepared for that, and that's again, I think that's a good thing. But it also is like there are people who, based on a Twitter account, I'm certain that they think they have a personal relationship with me.
Yep. Well, we've just about used up our time. I really appreciate you being on the podcast with us. This was very, very helpful and informative. In addition to learning about your books, learning about your process and your marketing process is going to be very helpful. I would love it if you could tell me a couple of URLs or your Twitter handle where people can find you on the internet. A lot of our people listen via podcatchers and they don't actually go to our website. So we would love for you to let people know where they can find you.
Well, there's a couple things you can do. Certainly, if you just do an internet search on Raymond Foster, I'll come up at the top. And that'll take you to my complete CV is online at police-lieutenant.com, and that links out to that one there particularly links out to all the articles I've written, all the books, tells you a lot about what I do. It gives you some, kind of inside information on me a little bit there. So that's a good one. And my major Twitter handle is simply police officer.
Okay.
And we've got about, it's over 20,000 people follow us on that. And that's where I primarily put out news and information about policing. But through that Twitter account, of course, we're linked back to Police Lieutenant. And at the very top, there's a big red print thing that says contact me. If you want to shoot me an email or call me on the phone, feel free. And the book that we're mostly pushing right now is Leadership Texas Hold'em Style. So get a copy.
Okay. I will definitely put a link to that in the show notes. As always, you can find us at BookGoodies.com, and you can find our interview by just putting Raymond Foster in the search box if it isn't the first one listed there. And we would love to have your comments both on what Raymond has to say and on what future topics you would like us to cover. And we want to thank Geekcast.fm for hosting all of our podcasts. And you can find us at Twitter at twitter.com/bookgoodies. And you can find me personally at twitter.com/Loxley, Loxly. That's like in Robin Hood as Robin of Loxley. So, thanks everybody for listening. Start writing and have a great day.